In a viral video, a woman is seen drawing a pistol and pointing it at a woman who's filming. You learn that this woman is black and that her family is calling this other woman racist. The video went viral and the press maligned the woman. Her name is Jillian Wurstenberg and her husband because they made it seem like she was just drawing this weapon in one of these Karen incidents. Although this one was particularly more egregious because she had actually drawn a weapon. But then people started to actually watch the full video. Now, the media is still maligning this family. But in the full video, you can see that they were not the aggressors. They tried to leave. This woman, Jillian, who pulled the gun, was trying to leave, and the family wasn't having it. For those that aren't familiar, these are a couple stills from the infamous video. Jillian has now spoken out, saying that she feared for her life. Woman charged with assault for pulling a gun on a black family during Chipotle parking lot argument claims she was the victim of ethnic intimidation and thought she was going to die. In an interview, she explains what happened from her point of view because, well, we've all seen the video and heard from the family. But in this instance, for one, it seems like a bad hair day. Like, this should not have escalated to this point. Everybody needed to back off and calm down. However, as much as you might say there are certain things everyone could have done better, it's hard to know exactly what you would do in a situation like this. And we now know, based on the full video, that this woman, Jillian, was not the aggressor. Should she have pulled out her weapon? I'm sure it's easy to say sitting in your room, watching a video on the internet, you would know exactly what she should or shouldn't have done. But considering the wave of violence, the protests, the riots, and the death, I can't say I'm surprised that she actually did fear for herself, particularly with what happened in Provo, Utah, where someone ran up to a car and shot into it. Now, look, man, you can have a big argument about whether it was the right thing or wrong thing to do, but I'll tell you this. You are not allowed to defend yourself at this point. At least that's what we're starting to learn from many of these stories. And I've got another story for you. You see, just the other day, there was a protest, which, I don't want to say it was a riot, but it was a heated protest with some scuffles between Black Lives Matter activists and the Detroit police. So you see, a man had been shot and killed by the police, and the protesters were holding up signs once again saying Black Lives Matter and blaming the police for this. The police in Detroit immediately released a video in which, first of all, they failed to to detain this individual. So as they're arresting his friend, the other guy just reaches into his pocket, pulls out a gun, and nearly point blank fires at a cop. Now, the cop is lucky to have been, they call it a miracle. The guy missed, but he was within a few feet. They then returned fire, killing this guy. The protesters tried playing it up, once again, without evidence. They made assumptions, and it turns out this guy actually was trying to kill these cops. The reason I highlight this is that we have many stories like this where the protesters don't care about the circumstances of what led up to this incident. They claim that in Georgia, for instance, Rayshard Brooks was just sleeping in his car and these evil cops killed him. The DA lies about it, when in reality, the dude stole a taser and fired at the cops who then returned fire. The story in Detroit is way worse. There's actually a video of the guy drawing the weapon, and this cop is lucky to be alive. Now, it's sad when anyone dies, man. But you got to understand what people like this woman, Jillian, will be thinking when this is a reality. Now, look, you can argue that an argument over someone bumping into it at Chipotle is not, does not warrant pulling out a weapon. But I think the problem is we're so tightly wound. We're getting to a dangerous position here. Who gets to determine whether or not you really did feel scared or didn't? Or what level of reasonable fear is appropriate? This is where things get tough. Do you have a right to defend yourself if you're fearing for your life? Yes. Well, then we see sometimes people really shouldn't have feared for their lives, but claim to have. And then how do you determine whether or not they did? They have a right to bear arms. This was in Michigan. She has a right to carry that weapon. I believe her husband was carrying concealed. And you had these people who refused to let them go, who were screaming at them and yelling at them. And then when they finally tried to leave, the mother went behind the car and hit the vehicle several times, and that triggered this woman, Jillian, to jump out with her weapon. Now, she's speaking up. I want to show you a bit of what she said, and then I want to show you what happened in Detroit. And then I want to show you something called the Karen Act, which basically makes it a crime to call 911 for racially discriminatory reasons. The problem there, and sort of the full wraparound for what the segment is about, if you fear for your life, the courts will say, I do not believe you. If you call 911 and say, I have a legitimate concern and call 911, the courts will say, I do not believe you. And therein lies the big problem. Everything we're seeing in terms of law enforcement is slowly falling on the side of defending the ideology. And it's important to distinguish between, why I say ideology. These far left activists who are protesting all over the place, they're mostly white people. So the thing I point out all the time is, considering the fact that you can see that they're progressive white people and conservative black people, and there are famous photos now emerging. There's one where you have a black man holding a Confederate flag and a white man holding a Black Lives Matter sign. Race isn't really the issue here. It's ideology. And I think it's actually, as horrible as many of these riots have become, and this incident, we don't want these things to happen. At least the one thing we're learning is, well, all of these incidents kind of debunk the racism, because you have Kanye West. Well, he took off the MAGA hat, but he was wearing the MAGA hat. He's conservative. You have people like Candace Owens, but you have people of opposing political factions of all different races. So, you know what? I say this somewhat as a joke, but at least amid all the conflict, we've learned to truly respect one. Well, no, not really, but it's a broken vision of people of all different backgrounds holding hands and singing together in their disdain for each other's ideology. But hey, at least we're unified. At least, I don't know. You get the point, right? Okay, let's read the story. The Daily Mail says, a white woman who was charged after she was filmed pulling a gun on an unarmed black woman and her daughters broke down in tears during a televised interview in which she describes how she feared for her life after the family blocked her from getting into her car and then started banging on it when she was inside. Jillian Woostenberg, is that what I said Wurstenberg? It's Woostenberg, 32, and her husband, Eric, have been charged with felonious assault stemming from the July 1st confrontation in Michigan. But they say they are victims of ethnic intimidation at the hands of Tekelia Hill and her family. Cell phone video captured the confrontation outside a Chipotle restaurant in Orion Township, about 40 miles northwest of Detroit. Jillian Woostenberg can be heard outside her vehicle shouting, "Get the F away, get away," while pointing a handgun. Now, I want to point out, for those of you that saw the initial video or saw my response to it, I want to point out something very important. For one, Jillian's finger is off of the trigger. That's proper trigger discipline, meaning it reduces the likelihood of an accidental discharge. Now, it may seem in the video that she's pointing it at the woman, but she's actually pointing it down. The woman was filming by holding her phone at her waist and pointing it slightly upwards. So it does look like the gun's pointing directly at her. It's actually, she's got the handgun aimed down and slightly to the side. I'm not saying that, that was safe or whatever. I'm just pointing out she wasn't like waving it in the face like we saw. The woman in St. Louis was actually like walking towards with the firearm. This was a little bit different. It was a little bit different. So we can see that these are apparently their mugshots. They say Jillian Woostenberg told Detroit television station WXYZ on Thursday that she was fearful when the Hill family members blocked her from getting into her vehicle and then banged on the back of it. That literally did happen. Within moments, a second or two, I had multiple people within 2 feet of me, and I just remembered thinking, I'm not going home tonight. She was asked what she meant to do with the video. Shows her loading a round into the chamber of her handgun and pointing it at the Hill family. That meant I'm about to die and I don't want to die, Wurstenberg said. We have seen a lot of violent videos. We have also crime stats that show, I would say statistically, this probably would have just been an altercation. The problem that I'm trying to bring up here, and we'll move on now to the protests in Detroit. How do you determine what is a reasonable fear? If somebody like Antifa, right? I would say their fears are completely unreasonable. Okay. But someone might disagree with me as to what is reasonable or isn't. And that's like the heart of the culture war. I'd argue if you think words are violence, then she feared for her life, right? If we use the perspective of the left in this circumstance, Jillian Woostenberg was blocked from getting her car. That was a physical action. She was threatened. They said, we are going to beat your white A. And then finally, when her husband helped her get in the car, they banged on the back of it. And now she might be thinking, we're going to get blocked in. This is going to escalate. And she got out and she told them to get away. Now, Jillian had her gun drawn. You can argue it was not appropriate or whatever, but I can't tell you what was going through her mind or what would be determined to be reasonable. Maybe a jury will. But she was backing away slowly. And the one with the phone kept getting close to her. When you have stories like this is Detroit, mind you. Take a look at this. Crowd gathers at scene where a man was shot and killed by police on Detroit's west side. Jillian Wustenberg, the incident happened about 40 miles northwest, I think they said, of Detroit. This protest happened in Detroit. Now, I can't show you the videos. Detroit police are forced to release body cam footage of fatal shooting of Hakeem Littleton to show he was armed and fired at them after protests erupted following his death. Confirmed. Not only did the police maintain, yes, he fired first, the video is now public. I might be able to show you just a still. It doesn't actually show anything graphic, just shows someone being arrested. But here's the man here. That's Hakeem. And then he reached in his pocket, pulled out a weapon, and he fired at the cops who are lucky to have survived. Now, sitting in your house, in your room, wherever you may live, you don't know what Detroit is like. You can only go by the descriptions. Now, this is Detroit's west side, so it seems to be much closer. Yes, it was Detroit police. So this is Detroit proper. Imagine you're Jillian Wustenberg. You live in Detroit. These are the stories you are hearing about. A guy was standing there and then all of a sudden pulled out a gun. Now you're surrounded by people threatening you. They block you from getting in your car. When you get in, they start banging on your car. It's easy to say, based on where I live, that would be unreasonable. Is that unreasonable based on what's going on in Detroit with riots and with people literally drawing weapons on cops? I'll tell you what, man. If it were Chicago, I know Chicago. And if somebody surrounded me, was threatening me, and then started banging on my car, well, you can't. I don't think you're allowed to open carry in Chicago. I'm not sure. You might be able to. They got complicated gun laws going over there. But I would absolutely be in fear for my life. So herein lies the big problem. Right now, I live in a very safe suburb. It is not one of these, I don't know. It's not like the best neighborhood in the world. It's like, I don't know, lower middle class. But it's a safe suburb. It's a small town I live in. I do not expect anything like that to ever become that bad. If I was surrounded by people and they were yelling at me, I'd be like, get out of here. And I would not expect anything to happen. If I was back home in Chicago, I'd be like, no way, dude. This is about to go bad and bad fast. They call it Chirac for a reason. You know what really, really got on my nerves growing up in Chicago? I could not stand road rage. I have zero tolerance today for road rage. I know people who grew up in the nice suburbs, and I'll be driving with them, and then someone will cut us off, and they will flip out and start cussing and swearing and flicking off the driver, and they'll look at him and go, eh. And I have zero tolerance for this. You know why? Because you know what happens on the South Side? When you do that to somebody and you challenge their honor, yeah, they get out with a gun. And I've had bad road rage experiences, man. There was a store in the South Side where this is what I was told. I don't know how true this was because I had friends telling me this. Apparently, there was a party going on a few miles from us on the South Side, because it was a big area where we all, like our circle of friends expanded around a few mile radius, maybe like within 5 miles of the Southwest Side. And apparently, somebody parked a car in a certain area of Chicago on the South Side, and someone walked up to the window and knocked on it because they were, I guess the idea was like, yo, you're parking in front of my house. Apparently they're going to a party, so they just parked wherever they wanted. Well, the dude sitting in the passenger seat was a dick, and he saw the guy knock on the window, and he told him to F off. He's like, get out of here, get out of here. And the guy's like, what are you doing? And he's like, get out of here. Don't knock on my window. So the guy just pulled out a gun and went, pop, pop. That's Chicago. You don't know what it's like in Detroit. You don't. We got a video right now of a dude shooting at cops. Now, you might argue this family, this mother and her daughter were not a threat. Fine. But is it reasonable to assume that there is a 1% chance? And what this woman, Jillian, did, I guess they're charging her. We'll see if the court upholds it as legal. Tell you what, man, as far as I know, Detroit's got bad crime. Maybe not. I don't know. That's my understanding, okay? All I can really say is I think you're going to find a lot of these progressive upper middle class, activists going like, I can't believe it. And you're going to have all of these suburbanite, progressives. In their mind, in their experience, in their world, it was not warranted. I'll tell you this, man. In my mind, where I come from, you got people who illegally have guns, and they will pull their shirt up as soon as you walk near their car. Let me tell you something. In Chicago, if you're in a parking lot of, say, like a burger joint or something on the South Side, and somebody starts cussing you out, saying, yo, what the guy would do standing next to his car is he would just pull his shirt up to show the gun, and that would be the end of it. Mostly. Sometimes the other guy pulls out his gun too. But the point is, based on my experience, if I had people surrounding me and yelling at me, I would argue for like a Chicago level incident, that was a bit restrained. Personally, I probably wouldn't have done what Jillian did, but you don't know what it's like where she comes from. You don't know what she was thinking. And therein lies the big challenge. The same is true for St. Louis. We now have national level politics, and many of these high profile leftist activists are suburbanite progressives with college degrees who have never experienced real hardship. That's why they're entitled whiny babies. And they're thinking like, I have never had anything like that happen to me. That woman is racist. You know what I would really, really enjoy? What will make me feel good. That's a better way to put it. I would absolutely love, please, any one of these progressives, anyone, I will pay your rent for a year to live in some of these neighborhoods, areas where I grew up. And I'm not saying it's because it's going to be dangerous. This is not an issue about them like getting hurt. No. I'm saying they might finally understand what it's like to truly live in a poor area with real conflict, poverty, and crime. I think they'll be fine. I know some people who have lost their lives, growing up, but this is a normal part of basically anywhere, because you can have bad things happen in the suburbs for sure, but they just don't get what it's like. They don't. And now they want their ideology and their national level politics and laws over areas they truly do not understand. These people who live in the nicest of areas, I would just love if you just lived where I lived growing up. Granted that the area has been, they decimated the housing projects. They just literally razed all the buildings and replaced it with grass. I'm not kidding. We did a segment on this in the IRL podcast. I couldn't believe it. Just 10 years ago, they just wiped it all out. I guess that's one way to get rid of the crime. But I'll tell you what, man, where my friends grew up, because it's really interesting how streets become borders for gangs and for just cliques and just general friends, or a lot of the immigrants who would come to certain areas would live in what they would call, say, like Ukrainian village or Little Italy and things like that. It's really interesting how that works. And so you could cross one street and the crime is up like 15, 20%, some ridiculous number, or people can come up to you and threaten you. Well, let's move on from this because you get the point on that. I want to show you now the Karen Act. San Francisco officials propose Karen Act, Caren, making racially biased 911 calls illegal. You may remember Miss Amy Cooper, the white woman. She's facing charges for calling police on a black man birdwatching in Central Park. Well, I got to tell you what, I would argue she should not have called 911, and you could interpret a crime here, okay? I say interpret because I don't want to play legal expert. I know people are going to be like, actually, Tim, you were wrong. I'm going to tell you this. The dude was telling her she can't have her dog there. She couldn't have her dog there. They got into an argument, but then she called 911 going, help, I'm being attacked or whatever. And it's like, all right, well, there you go. And she told the guy that she was going to let him know that it was like a blackmail or whatever. Yeah, she should have done it. Now, I can understand why she was threatened because the guy was trying to coax her dog away from her. But then for her to call 911 and make it this big thing, it's like, dude, you're in Central Park, man. This dude, I think his name is Chris Cooper. I'm sorry. New York has really, really low crime. Central Park is really, really nice. This dude had like binoculars and glasses, and he was actually pulling a Karen too. Excuse me, you can't have your dog here. I don't think she was being threatened. So they're charging with a crime. I do think so much of this is silly. And there used to be, there was a time when you'd get into a fight and punch someone in the face, and the cops would come in and be like, everybody go home. I'm not arresting anybody. Shut up. Today, it's like everything is litigious. The cops will get sued for not doing their job. So like the cops are just like, we're going to arrest everybody, whatever. Still, not always. But this is where people just kind of go over the top. The point I'm trying to make is at a certain point, the cops can show up and be like, can you all just shut up? This is a non-incident. It shouldn't be news. But this brings me to the next point about self-defense and what is determined to be reasonable. This woman is frantic. Were her fears legitimate? The real question with her 911 call is, did she really feel like she was being threatened when this guy was trying to coax her dog away? That's not for me to decide because I can't read her mind. And if she did feel threatened, then why should she be charged for calling 911? Therein lies the big problem. You see, New York is catering to the ideology, in which case they're going to say, I don't believe you. Well, that's dangerous precedent. And it's hard to know when people are exploiting it. This is in San Francisco, mind you, you genuinely feel threatened. How many people are now going to say, I feel threatened and I'm scared, but I'm worried I will get arrested if I call 911? It's a serious challenge. So filing a false police report should be a crime, regardless of the crime. But you need to be able to prove it. One of the big problems I think we have is that when people do file false charges, bear false witness, they are not held accountable. And this includes police officers. The issue to me is not creating a Karen Act for racially biased 911 calls. Like that's ridiculous to me. Well, let's read it, okay? Let's see. They say the Karen Act, caution against racially exploitative non-emergencies, was introduced on Tuesday in San Francisco's Board of Supervisors. What does it do? Using 911 as a tool for your prejudice towards marginalized communities is unjust and wrong. Just okay, so we get it. It's rather vague, okay? They say the bill could impact millions of Californians from becoming targets of hate and prevent the weaponization of our law enforcement against communities of color. Racist false reports put people in danger and waste resources. They do. But are we just swinging the pendulum in the wrong direction? Don't we already criminalize the improper use of 911 calls? And what happens now? You have many of these videos where it's actually funny to me. There was one where a woman walks up to a guy who's painting Black Lives Matter on his stoop or whatever. And she says, it's not your, is this your property? You can't be doing this. And the guy was Filipino and he argues with her. And the husband, they were both like, we know who lives here and you can't be doing this. As it turns out, the guy painting actually lived there. So here's the first problem I have. When someone comes up to you and gives you the business, your first reaction doesn't need to be to pull out your phone and start filming them and give them the business back. I would just say, if I was, say, painting something in my yard or whatever, and someone came up to me and said, do you live here? You can't be doing this. I'd say, actually do live here? Are we done? Okay, have a nice day. It's called just being mature. But in many of these circumstances, the first reaction is, I'm going to pick up my phone and film you and get ya. And that's what it is. And now we have seen a ton of fake Karening incidents where people try to trigger some kind of Karening. And there was one that I saw that went moderately viral where they pull up, there's a building with Black Lives Matter signs on it. The building owners or rentees or whatever show up and they're confused and they pull the signs down. And then these two people start filming them saying, you're racist. Why are you pulling this down? There's one video where like some women are washing graffiti off a building. And then someone says they're racist for doing so. And in these videos, the people are just like, what? I'm sorry. Like they have no idea what's going on. The funny thing about that Black Lives Matter on the building being torn down, the sign, is that they're like, why are you tearing the sign down? And the guy just goes, this is my building. And they're like, yeah, but why are you tearing the sign down? And he goes, I'm taking the sign off my building. Like he really doesn't understand the cult-like mentality these people have. They expect him to know everything he knows from Twitter, and the dude clearly didn't. So what happens now? When they're getting harassed and they call 911, are they going to be like, well, that was racially motivated? It'll happen in some instances. I'm not convinced this will actually stop anything because if you really want to prosecute someone for doing this, you can just do it. So anyway, look, here's the main point. With all of these things, they're trying to read your mind. They're going to say, we know what you were thinking. We know you were lying. We know how you really felt. We know why you did it. Sure, when it comes to court, they will try to assert motive and they will try to argue as to what the motive was. They'll have to do this in this case. When it comes to this woman, Jillian, however, you draw a fine line between an actual altercation, someone being threatened, and whether or not they have a right to defend themselves. So I guess you get the point. Let me just wrap it up one final time. Please consider this, an important point that very few people have made. When it comes to any of these situations, you need to take into consideration where they are. For the woman Amy Cooper in New York, one of the safest cities in the country, yes, it is. There's a lot of crime, but not per capita. Central Park, of all places, very safe. She did not need to freak out the way she did. I do not believe she did, although I do think the whole incident was stupid. Jillian, however, in Detroit, 40 miles outside of Detroit, hey, maybe they do have bad crime there. I don't know if it's the same as Detroit. I don't know. I don't know exactly where this Orion is, but 40 miles northwest of Detroit, could that be anywhere near Flint? I mean, this area doesn't have a good reputation, so maybe she was freaking out, and your bias against her is because you don't get where she's from. There you go. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net. Thanks for hanging out. And I will see you all next time.